Hello, and welcome back to Intelligent Pod, the show where we dive deep into the science, psychology, and real-life stories behind the intelligent lives we're all striving to lead. I'm your host, Sophie Lane, and today, we're tackling a topic that's close to my heart, and if the statistics are anything to go by, probably close to yours too. We're breaking down imposter syndrome, what it is, why it happens, and, most importantly, how you can outsmart it. So, whether you're tuning in during your morning commute, on a lunch break walk, or winding down at the end of a long day, I want to say thank you for letting me keep you company. And if this is your first time with us, welcome. You've picked a great episode to start with. Let's get into it. All right, imposter syndrome. If you've spent any time in school, in the workplace, or just scrolling social media, you've probably heard this phrase. But what does it really mean? Imposter syndrome is that nagging, persistent feeling that you're not as competent as others perceive you to be. Like, you're just faking it. And at any moment, someone's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, you don't belong here." Sound familiar? You're not alone. In fact, studies estimate that up to 70% of people experience imposter syndrome at some point in their lives. 70%! That means if you're in a meeting with 10 people, 7 of them are probably sitting there quietly wondering if they measure up. Let's paint a picture. Imagine you've just landed a new job, or you've been asked to give a presentation. Instead of feeling proud or excited, your stomach twists into knots. You start second-guessing your abilities, attributing your success to luck or timing instead of skill or hard work. Maybe you even worry that you're a fraud, and it's only a matter of time before everyone figures it out. If any of those thoughts sound like your inner monologue, take a deep breath. This episode is for you. Today, we're going to explore imposter syndrome through a few different lenses: the psychological, the scientific, and the cultural. I'll share an eye-opening academic study, a real-life story, and crucially, some actionable steps you can take to break the cycle. So, let's kick things off with the psychological perspective. Psychologically speaking, imposter syndrome was first coined in 1978 by psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes. They noticed that high-achieving women were often plagued by feelings of self-doubt, even when their accomplishments were objectively impressive. Over time, researchers have found that imposter syndrome isn't exclusive to women. It can affect anyone, regardless of gender, age, or background. What's happening here? Well, our brains have a funny way of minimizing our own achievements. It's called the intellectual fraudulence phenomenon. When we succeed, we tend to attribute it to external factors. Maybe you got lucky or someone helped you out. But when we fail or stumble, we blame ourselves and see it as proof that we're out of our depth. This pattern is often driven by perfectionism and a fear of failure. It can be especially intense in environments that are competitive or where expectations are sky high. Think elite universities, tech startups, or creative industries. But really, it can pop up anywhere. Now, let's look at this from a scientific angle. There's growing evidence that imposter syndrome is linked to how our brains process self-evaluation and social comparison. A fascinating 2019 study published in the Journal of General Internal Medicine surveyed medical students and residents, highly educated, ambitious people, and found that over half reported moderate to severe levels of imposter syndrome. Those who felt like imposters also reported higher rates of burnout, anxiety, and even depression. What's really interesting is that imposter syndrome doesn't go away with more success. In some cases, it gets worse. The higher you climb, the more visible you become, and the more pressure you might feel to prove yourself. It's a vicious cycle. Let's bring in a cultural perspective. Different cultures have different attitudes towards success, failure, and self-promotion. In some cultures, humility is prized, and talking about your achievements is frowned upon. In others, there's intense pressure to fake it till you make it. Social media ramps this up even further. We're constantly exposed to curated highlight reels of other people's lives and careers. It's easy to believe that everyone else has it all figured out, while you're the only one stumbling through. Let me share a real-life story that might hit close to home. A friend of mine, we'll call her Maya, was promoted to a leadership role at her company. Objectively, she was more than qualified. Years of experience, glowing reviews, and a list of accomplishments as long as your arm. But every time she sat in a meeting, she'd worry, what if I say something wrong? What if they realize I'm not as smart as they think? She worked longer hours than ever, double and triple checked her emails, and put off big decisions out of fear she'd mess up. It wasn't until she confided in a mentor, who, by the way, admitted to having the same fears, that she realized how common these feelings are. So, why am I telling you all this? Because naming the problem is the first step towards overcoming it. If you can relate to Maya, you're not alone. In fact, you're in very good company. Everyone from Michelle Obama to Tom Hanks has spoken openly about their own struggles with imposter syndrome. All right, let's pivot to some actionable advice. How can you break out of the imposter syndrome trap and reclaim your confidence? I've pulled together a handful of strategies, backed by research and tested in real life. First, talk about it. Imposter syndrome thrives in silence. The more you keep these feelings bottled up, the more power they have. Find someone you trust, a friend, mentor, or even a therapist, and share what you're experiencing. Chances are they'll have their own stories to share. Second, reframe your thoughts. When that inner critic pipes up and says, you don't belong here, try flipping the script. Instead of focusing on what you don't know, remind yourself of what you've already accomplished. Keep a brag file, a folder of positive feedback, awards, or moments you're proud of. When self-doubt creeps in, revisit it. Third, resist the urge to compare yourself to others. Social comparison is a surefire way to feel like an imposter. Everyone's path is different. Instead of measuring yourself against someone else's highlight reel, focus on your own growth and progress. Fourth, accept that perfection is a myth. Mistakes and setbacks are part of learning. Instead of seeing them as evidence that you're an imposter, try to view them as stepping stones. Even the most successful people stumble. What sets them apart is their willingness to learn and keep going. Finally, consider using affirmations or mindfulness techniques. Simple practices like journaling, meditation, or even a few deep breaths can help ground you in the present moment and quiet that inner critic. Let's do a quick recap. Imposter syndrome is incredibly common. It affects people from all walks of life. It's driven by perfectionism, fear of failure, and our tendency to downplay our own accomplishments. Cultural factors and social media can make it worse, but the good news is there are concrete steps you can take to break the cycle. Talk about your feelings, reframe your thoughts, avoid toxic comparisons, accept imperfection, and practice mindfulness. I want to close with this thought. Feeling like an imposter doesn't mean you're inadequate. It means you're human and you care about doing a good job. In fact, the very people who worry about being imposters are often the ones who are the most conscientious, hardworking, and capable. So the next time self-doubt creeps in, remember, you belong here. You've earned your place, and you are far more capable than you give yourself credit for. Thank you so much for joining me today on Intelligent Pod. If you found this episode helpful, I would love if you could leave a review. It really helps more people find the show. For detailed show notes and resources, visit intelligentpod.com. And if you have thoughts, questions, or your own story to share, I'd love to hear from you. Drop me a line at sophie@intelligentpod.com. Take care of yourself, and remember, you are smarter and stronger than your inner critic would have you believe. Until next time, I'm Sophie Lane, and this is Intelligent Pod.